Today, we become legends.
Alright boys, 10.6 item changes coming right at you. I've already got a video on my channel for the god changes. There was some substantial nerfs to top performers and some actually really surprisingly good buffs to some underperformers like Fafnir and stuff like that. So check that video out after this one if you haven't already seen it on my channel. It should already be up by the time I'm finished with this one. But yeah, so many item changes coming in this patch. I'm going to go more in depth on a few of them. And also the new items, like the new glyphs that we've got on the screen here. They're not actually on the screen, but they will be in a second. We've got new glyphs for Relic, Dagger, Pridwen, and Runeforged hammer. That is in terms of new items. And then in terms of the item changes, a lot of them, it's going to be similar to 10.3, where a lot of the changes are kind of just redundant and everything is getting nerfed by the same amount. And so I will just skim over the whole patch notes and show you guys what's going on with it, but I'm only going to talk specifically about a few that I think are really going to be impactful, because there's changes to basically every single item in the game. There's no reason, and it will be a waste of time to cover every single one of them when they're all just like, this item loses 15% of its power, this item loses 10% of its protections. It's just stuff like that. So I won't be covering every single item change, but I will try to link the patch notes in the description if I remember, if you want to like fully check them out and give them a read for yourself. But I will go over them. I just won't be giving my in-depth thoughts on most of these. But let's just jump right into it without further ado, because it's going to be a long video here, I think. So first up, we have the Relic Dagger glyphs. We have Bewitched Dagger. So it keeps its normal passive, of course. And this one is, of course, as we all know, Witchblade is returning. Rejoice, boys. Rejoice. We finally have a decent counter, especially on supports, to attack speed characters, because the meta right now is just kind of attack speed characters. Like, you've got basic attack junglers, you've got hunters being really strong, you've got double hunter comps going on right now. So this is going to be really useful. Probably built more so on supports, but solo laners could absolutely build this as well. Just reducing 25% attack speed and aura around. You're going to be super strong against double hunter, or like hunter plus like Nemesis, hunter plus Bakasura, that kind of stuff, hunter plus Mercury. And so yeah, going to be very useful there. It's a simple one, but it's nice to finally have this effect back in the game, and you don't have to buy a full item for it. You can buy a Relic Dagger, which will be useful for your relics as well. And then Eldritch Dagger, which I think is the more interesting of the two, because it's a new effect. Whenever you activate a relic, your protections are increased by 15%, and you gain the ability to see wards for 10 seconds. So this is going to be really huge in the Pro League. We know a lot that in the Pro League, they sometimes go Seer of the Jungle instead of Protector of the Jungle. Protector has way better stats, but Seer, they go because it has like the ward vision capability for like objective play and sieging and stuff like that. You want to be able to counter ward. And so you probably won't need your jungler to do that anymore. You just, on your supports, maybe even on your solo laners, you just get this, and then whenever you activate, like, whenever you blink in or something like that, or I guess this would be better on supports, because they can use like their team fighting relics, maybe even by meditation, and then you like heal your team up, you can see wards and you get increased protections and stuff like that. I think this has a lot of applications, both for the counter warding aspect and just 15% increased protections is going to be big if you're near the protection cap. And of course, effects like this, I assume will be how it works, because almost every effect like this can bypass the protection cap, and so that'll be really nice. Two very cool glyphs for Relic Dagger, an item that doesn't really see much play at the moment, so hopefully these glyphs can breathe a little bit of life back into it, especially the Witchblade one. That's going to be huge. On to Runeforged hammer though. First up, we have Flameforged hammer, which is additionally to the normal effect where they take 10% more damage in like the runic area from Runeforged hammer. Enemy gods within the rune are burned, dealing 5 plus 10% of your protections from items and abilities as magical damage every 1 second, or for 3 seconds after leaving it as well. So you're basically guaranteed to get 4 ticks from this, because you'll get the initial one as it spawns on them, and then 3 seconds after leaving it as well. So you're guaranteed 4 ticks here. You might get a little bit more than that, and so you're guaranteed at least 20 plus 40% of your protections from items. If you're at the protection cap, that's roughly 600 prots, so 40% of that is like 240 damage. That's pretty substantial. That's quite a lot of damage for like if you're building a full tank build. Obviously, this is going to be built on solo laners more so than it's going to be built on supports. I highly doubt you'll see this on supports, except for maybe super aggressive ones. Fenrir is an interesting case with this, because when you bite them, you can just keep them in the rune the whole time if they don't have beads, and so you might get a lot more value. You might get like upwards of 400 or 500 damage if you fen ult them and just keep them in the rune the whole time. So potentially a really good item for solo, or maybe even like Bruiser jungle Fenrir, potentially even support Fenrir. Should be really good for that kind of thing, and any other gods that have a similar application where they can CC you for a long time and keep you there. This will be really good for that. And the other glyph we have is a rune breaking hammer. So your next successful hard CC creates a shockwave around the enemy. People that are affected by the shockwave deal 10% less damage and take 10% more for 3 seconds. So a little bit more of a simple effect. Probably the one that's going to be built a little bit more on gods that can't necessarily keep people in this area, but this just seems really strong even if you can't keep them in the area. This is definitely good for solo laners, I feel like. This is maybe more of like an aggressive bruiser support option, I feel like. You kind of like dive in as maybe like a Horus or something like that. You hard CC them, and then they're taking 10% less damage and dealing 10%. Sorry, all the way around there. Taking 10% more damage, dealing 10% less. Could be pretty good, especially in combination with like the protection reduction from Fracture on Horus. Like, I think both these glyphs have a lot of potential, but I think Flameforged is definitely the better one, especially because it's more applicable to certain solo laners that can make good use of it. Onto one that is potentially a little bit more supportive, but also good for solo laners as well. You know, these are all kind of tanky glyphs. We have Pridwen. So first up, with Glorious Pridwen, basically it doubles the effect of like the damage burst. So normally with Pridwen, you get the shield based on protections, and then when it's depleted or expires, it deals damage and slows people. With this one, when your ultimate is finished casting, you instantly deal an explosion of the same magnitude, and then when it's destroyed, you do it again. So basically you get a double explosion on this, so it's going to be really good for like aggressive solo laners that want to get in that back line. You're going to be dealing a total of 180% of your protections from items and abilities with this, which is... Wait, that's so much damage. Okay, this seems kind of insane, dude. Maybe we are going to be in a tank battle. Everyone's been crying about it. Maybe they're right, dude. Holy shit. 180% of your protections from items is like almost 1,000 damage if you've got near the protection cap. Of course, we'll see further down that they are nerfing the protections on a lot of items, so it's going to be harder to get to that protection cap, but... If you're near the protection cap, this is dealing like upwards of 800 damage. Obviously, that's pre-mitigations. It won't be actually dealing that much because backliners have a lot of prots and solo laners don't build pen, but still, this feels like a lot of damage. And, you know, the applications where you can get more prots from abilities, you know, like Fenrir or Achilles and stuff like that, it's going to be dealing even more. So this seems really strong. But we also have Reverent Pridwen, which is essentially the other way around. Instead of duplicating the damage burst, you're duplicating the shield. So you now gain a shield equal to 200% of your protections from items instead of the 90% that you would normally get with the regular Pridwen. So this is just doubling or slightly more than doubling the shield that you're going to get. So 200% of your protections from items. Again, this could be almost 1,000 HP in shields. This seems broken, I'm not going to lie. I'm happy about it as a tank main, but I can see why the ADC mains might be crying when they see this patch notes. This is insane. Like, the Relic Dagger glyphs seem just pretty decent. I don't think they're going to be anything super insane. The Runeforged ones, I think Flameforged has the potential to be really strong, and Runebreaking is just kind of fine. But both of these Pridwen glyphs look really insane. I feel like Pridwen's got to be an auto build. You know, on supports, you probably build this one. On solo laners, you probably build this one. But I think you could build either of them on either of support or solo and be completely fine, because these seem broken as fuck, dude. Like, 200% of your prots from items, you just get an almost 1,000 HP shield if you're near the prot cap. That's kind of stupid. And then, of course, you still get the explosion that's dealing 75% of your protections from items, so... I don't know, dude. This seems really strong. Also, the artwork on these, holy shit, this is nice, dude. Look at this artwork. Whoever made this, I love you. This is beautiful artwork for these two Pridwen ones. Just in general, really nice artwork, but the Pridwen ones especially are super nice. But yeah, those are the new glyphs. We'll move on now to like the general like item changes in terms of like all of the stat reductions that are going on. So basically, all tier 3 items will receive the following changes. Power stats reduced by 30%, protection stats and health reduced by 15%. They're going to be rounded to increments of 5 though, so it might not be exactly that amount. The only unchanged items are Odysseus Bow and Toxic Blade because they don't have any health, protections, or power on them, so yeah. Goals, they're going to change the feel of the power curve of the game, especially towards the mid-late game, make power and prot caps harder to reach and more meaningful to reach, decrease burstiness in DPS versus DPS combat, and empower tanks and tanky builds by nerfing HP and protections less than power. So yeah, they're about half as much nerfed in terms of the protections versus the power. And so yeah, in addition to this, some items might see additional nerfs if they've been specifically overperforming, so we'll see that further down. So basically, I'm just going to kind of skim over all of these and only talk about the ones that I think are going to be really impactful, which actually this first one kind of is. Arendite, that is like a substantial power reduction on Arendite, you know, 75 down to 50, pretty huge. But yeah, from now on, I'm just going to be scrolling down. You can read them as I scroll if you want, but I'm probably not going to talk about most of them. So we have Arcee, we have Atalanta's Bow. Bancroft's Talon is interesting because it's getting double nerfed. You know, you're losing 30 base, you're also losing 30 from the passive as well. So it's going to be going down to 140 power instead of 200. That's a really substantial nerf to Bancroft's Talon. And obviously the glyph gets that as well. We have Berserker Shield, Bladed Boomerang. Bloodforge gets a similar treatment to Arendite, where its power's going down to actually, I think, lower than it was before it had the attack speed before. So, like, Bloodforge definitely going to be getting a substantial power nerf there. Book of Thoth, probably worth talking about considering they majorly nerfed Book of Thoth already in like a recent patch, maybe a couple of patches ago when like book tablet builds were being huge. This just feels overkill. I know they're trying to nerf all the power and stuff, but like this item's gotta be dead, right? 50 base power and only 4% conversion. Goes up to 6% conversion with the evolved version, but it just feels like Book of Thoth's gotta be dead after this patch, dude. It feels like there's no reason to ever build this item anymore. Brawlers, Breastplate of Valor and all its glyphs. Breastplate of Regrowth gets the prot reduction, but also decreased movement speed from 30% to 20%. Of course, this is an item that is basically warping the solo meta at the moment. If you can't abuse Breastplate of Regrowth and you're not the mana, you're basically not being played in solo. So it makes sense that this item's getting like extra substantial nerfs. Caduceus Club gets a little bit of a nerf to the movement speed aura as well. As I mentioned in my God video, they're trying to make movement speed reduction a little bit of a sub-theme of this patch. So they're trying to reduce movement speed on certain items. So that's why Cad Club got a little bit more of a nerf than like would be typical. Cannonier's Cuirass, Charon's Coin goes from 90 to 65, pretty impactful there. Chronos Pendant, Contagion. Deathbringer now only has 30 power, which feels kind of sad, but I guess I do kind of like it because it has really strong passives, really strong glyphs, and so I feel like this item being, you know, you've already got some power on and crit online, you're just building this to really enhance your crits and take them to the next level. I think that is actually kind of fine with it having 30 power. Demon Blade, Demonic Grip, Devos, Divine Ruin going down pretty substantially. Doom Orb loses 40 power, that's pretty big. 90 base power on Doom Orb feels really bad for it now, right? It used to have like 145, so, you know, as much as Book of Thoth has been nerfed, it seems like the other mage starting options are also getting nerfed pretty substantially here. Emperor's Armor, they've not only done the standard changes, but they've also reduced the attack speed debuff and attack speed buff on structures, so going to be, depending on the application you're buying it for, it's going to be harder or easier to siege, which they are making a little bit of a theme of the patch. They want to make sieging a little bit easier. If I end up making a video on the conquest changes, I'll explain that in more detail. Let me know if you want to see that down below. Erosion, Feyblessed, Fail Not, Thebes, all pretty standard. Genji's standard. Glad standard. Golden Blade, you don't care about losing 10 power that much on Golden Blade, you're buying it for the passive effect, so Golden Blade is practically unaffected by this. If anything, it's been buffed because other items losing those stats is like more impactful than Golden Blade losing those stats, if you understand what I mean by that. Griffin Wing Earrings, Katana only loses 5 power. Again, you're buying this item for the passive effect, so losing 5 power on it's literally not going to matter at all. If anything, the item got buffed. Heart Ward. Yeah, so with all the auras, they're shifting them down slightly so that backliners don't have quite as much protections, which is causing a little bit of a problem with solo laners not being able to do damage to backliners. And so they're going to be reducing the pro auras from a lot of them as well. Heartward Amulet gets that treatment. Hydras, Jotun's barely gets nerfed. Last Gasp, Lotus Sickle, Magi's, Mail of Renewal, Mantle. All pretty standard stuff here. Obsidian Shard, Onis, Pestilence. Phalanx. Phalanx gets no nerfs to like the passive though, so Phalanx might be a little bit stronger because the passive like prots and attack speed that it's giving haven't been nerfed at all, and so maybe Phalanx is actually potentially like relatively buffed in this patch. Poly. Pridwen goes down to 25 and change explosion damage to scale off of total protections instead of the initial shield health. Also, we've already kind of discussed that a little bit in the Pridwen section further up. Prophetic Cloak. So yeah, the aura passive is like substantially nerfed on Prophetic Cloak. So if you're going like Prophetic plus other aura items, backliners are going to be quite a little bit less like just default tanky. Okay, my light just died. Backliners are going to be a little bit less like default tanky in this patch, it seems. Pyth Piece gets nerfed on like basically every area, so pretty substantial for Pyth Piece. It's one of those items where it gives like pretty much everything. It gives power, it gives health, it gives aura power and stuff like that, so Pyth Piece gets hit pretty hard. Kins, decreased power, decreased passive scaling threshold floor from 3% at 2000 to 1.5% at 2250. Oh, so against squishies it's going to be less good, right? So it's still going to be the same effectiveness, I think 6% against tanks, but it's going to be less effective against squishies now. Which makes sense because kin size, like, 2000 health used to be quite hard to achieve for a squishy, whereas now base health goes over 2000 for a squishy because of 9.5. And so it makes sense that they're making this change so it's not quite as effective versus squishies. Give crit that, like, identity of being what you go if you want to burst squishies kind of thing. Rage. Increase the number of stacks to evolve. So it's the same amount of crit chance, but you require one more stack to evolve. And they've also lost a little bit of power. So Rage gets some pretty substantial nerfs. Rejuvenating Spirit. No one builds that item. Relic Dagger. Rod. Another Rod. Runeforged. Also, Runeforged is getting cheaper. And like standard nerfs for it. And also it's getting those glyphs. So we'll probably see quite a bit more of Runeforged. Sekhmets. No one builds this item. Serrated, Shadow Drinker, Shoguns, Silver Branch. Where decreased max stacks from 100 to 20. So you're only barely going to be able to overcap attack speed with Silver Branch now. You can't go like quite as high as you used to be able to. To be fair, it was already relatively hard. Like you were never getting to 100 stacks. It was already relatively hard to get above about 30 or 40 stacks on Silver Branch anyway. And so I guess it isn't that big of a nerf. But yeah, that's interesting to see. Substantial for Silver Branch there. Soul Eater, Soul Gem. Soul Reaver is getting the same change as Kin's size, so it's going to be a little bit less effective against squishies, but against tanks it's completely unchanged, so it's going to be a little bit more of that identity of I want to be a delete tank, so I'm buying Soul Reaver, rather than I'm buying Soul Reaver in every build because it still does well against squishies, so yeah, good changes there in my opinion. Sovereignty does not get the aura protection reduction that Heartward Amulet got, which is interesting. I feel like they've kind of missed that. It probably should have gotten the same treatment, right? They're basically mirror items of each other. Spear of Deso, Spear of Magus, Spectral. They've decreased the passive power on it as well, so Spectral kind of gets double nerfed a little bit. Baubles gets a cost reduction for its power reduction, so that's probably a buff overall to Sphinx Bauble, because you were never really building this for like the big power they provided, you were building it for the 50% CDR. I mean, you weren't building it anyway, but if you were building it for that, so maybe a little bit of a buff relatively for Sphinx Baubles there. Spirit Robe, Staff of Muradin, Stone of Binding. Okay, so a little bit of a nerf to the Pen of Stone of Binding. It is a very popular item, one of the premier ways that tanks can like actually deal damage to backline squishies. And backline squishies are getting less protections in this patch because the auras are being nerfed. So it makes sense that you would also nerf the counter to like those kind of aura items as well in Stone of Binding, or it might become a little bit too strong in terms of shredding backline squishies, so understandable to see that. Tablet nerfed as well. Crusher, Executioner, Titans, Trans. So it's losing 10 power and also 1% power conversion. How much mana would you... I think this gives 1,000 mana on its own. So you're losing 10 power from the Transcendence, but you might also lose a little bit from base mana and other stuff. So maybe you're losing about 15 to 20 power from that passive. So Trans has actually been nerfed pretty substantially. You're probably losing about 20 to 30 power on Trans from the combination of both of these. So that's worth noting. Typhons, Vital Amp, Warlocks, Wingblade, and now we're on to starter items. So they did say they were going to be looking at starter items a little bit more than they were looking at regular items, so we might see some more substantial changes here for the starters. Nothing really big for Sentinel's Boon. Right, so it's getting a little bit less of the aura prot. So instead of sharing 80 between all nearby allies, it shares 60 instead. And so, again, backliners going to have having a little less protections. Sentinel's Embrace was a very popular upgrade in the current meta. You know, you go Sentinel's Prophetic into another aura item, and Thebes, like, your backliners are infinitely tanky, and so, yeah, backliners probably going to be losing about 20 to 30 prots, depending on the situation, just from not having support auras, so... This is going to be a really big patch for tanks, dude, now that I'm looking at this. I can kind of understand if people might be a little pissed at this. Like, as much as I love this myself, we'll have to see how it plays out, because tanks are definitely underperforming right now, and they do need something, but this might go a little too far with, like, those Pridwen Glyphs and stuff, and, like, backliners losing a lot of prots. Compassion gets nerfed, but the damage redirection doesn't get nerfed. Same thing with Heroism's passive, so maybe you're looking more towards Compassion and Heroism now instead of Sentinels in your support role. Bombers, standard stuff. Tainted, standard stuff. War Banner, standard stuff. Death's Embrace, standard. Seer of the Jungle and Protector of the Jungle, standard. But Protection of the Jungle does get pretty substantial, like, decrease on the protection buff on the passive as well, so that's worth noting. Standard for Arrow. Standard for Cowl. Standard for Shroud. Sigil, of course, has a lot of the stats that are getting nerfed, so Sigil's actually taking a pretty substantial nerf here. Decreased power, decreased both protections, decreased health. So it's one of those items that has all four of these stats on, so it is getting pretty substantially nerfed. Sundering Axe gets the power and prots. Axe of Animosity, health and prots. Bluestone. Archmages, pretty substantial power reduction on Archmages there, actually. Pendulum, so they've decreased the power on the passive from 10 power per 10% of mana to 7, so it's getting kind of double nerf there. You're losing 30 power, and then you're also losing... you know, up to 30 power if you're completely out of mana, but it's never going to be actually 30. So, like, you're losing 30 to 60 power depending on your max mana when you're building Pendulum. That's pretty substantial, actually. Maybe we'll see a little bit more variety in mage starters coming up here. And mannequins as well. And now we have some shifted items that aren't necessarily directly nerfed. These are items that aren't performing as well right now and will get buffs alongside their standard stat reduction. These include tank items, mage ADC items, and DPS class glyphs. So Absolution gets the standard stuff, but they've increased the passive CC immunity from 0.6 to 1 second, so it's going to be a little bit easier to time that in terms of like immuning Ares ults, immuning Dash ults, immuning CC in general. And also they've added a 10% mana heal on hit of the passive, so when you ult, anyone that gets that cleanse is also going to get a little bit of mana back, just a nice substantial like a utility buff for Absolution there, I like that. Abyssal Stone, they've decreased the internal cooldown and increased the debuff duration alongside the standard stuff. Amulet of Silence, they've decreased the number of stacks to trigger the item and decreased the internal cooldown pretty massively alongside the standard stuff. Archdruid's Fury, decreased the internal cooldown and standard stuff really, also decreased the cost a little bit. Cyclopean Ring loses the power but increased the percent max health damage from 7 to 8%. Wasn't this 8% originally before they like freaked out and nerfed everything related to magical ADCs at the start of the season? I think it was, so they're basically just reverting that. Dawnbringer, they've increased the passive procs and movement speed, but it now caps at 3 enemy gods in the area, so it's going to be easier to get those stats basically on Dawnbringer. Frostbound Hammer, increase the HP 5, decrease the internal cooldown on the passive in return for the standard stuff, also a decreased cost. Gem of Iso, basically the same thing as Frostbound Hammer, but for mages. Hasten Ring got a slight cost decrease in return for the power reduction. Jotun's Cunning, decreased stacks required. Okay, that's... Why are they buffing Jotun's Cunning, dude? Jotun's Cunning's already by far the best glyph. If anything, it's like one of the best DPS glyphs there is. So now instead of every third ability you get 25% CDR off of it, it's every second ability you get 20% CDR. So after 6 abilities where you would normally get 50% effective CDR, you would now get 60%. So yeah, they're buffing Jotun's Cunning pretty substantially there. Just every other ability gets 20% extra CDR. That's really huge. Jotun's is going to be even better than it was before. Jotun's Vigor, they've increased the duration on the passive and increased the HP threshold to trigger, so that's nice. Jotun's Vigor was always like the worst glyph of these two, I think, and so nice to see it get buffed there. Manticore Spikes, decreased cost and increased passive damage in return for the standard stuff. Midgardian, increased max stacks and increased passive duration on the attack speed and movement speed reduction. Stone of Gaia, increased passive heal on the knockup from 5 to 7% and a general passive heal effect by 0.05%. Talisman of Energy, increase in movement speed and attack speed, decrease the max stacks. So it's going to be easier to get to basically similar amounts. So it would be 12% before, it's still 12%, but it's going to be easier to get to that max stack count in a team fight, for example. You get +3 per level instead of +2 per level on Telkines in return for the power reduction. 8% health steal now on Ethereal Staff. Dependent items. These items rely on specific power, health, and protection thresholds and are being adjusted. Yeah, so because all of the power and health and stuff is coming down in general across the board, the items that require like a certain amount of that are just going to be requiring less now to make them still relevant. And this is basically Nimble Bancrofts, Heartseeker, Lonos, and Rangers. And then Ratatoskr items, just decreased power on every single Acorn. Cost reduction on Bluestone, slight increase to Bumba's Dagger, because Eye has been very strong. Eye has been basically the go-to for like the last forever, and so like Bumba's Dagger getting a buff is fine. War Flag increased assist range, increased HP, sorry, per assist trigger. Wing Shard decreased the movement speed, makes sense. Wing Shard's been very popular for like chasing people down and stuff. Bracer of Brilliance also reduced the movement speed in theme with the patch, but decreased the duration as well from 8 to 6. And same thing on the upgrades basically. And then, yeah, finally down here we have the percent pen changes are reverted. I've touched on this already, but basically, instead of things being 8 and 16% percent pen and 32% cap, it's going to be basically reverted back to 10, 20, and 40% cap. This is fine, you know, there's a lot of good stuff for tanks in this update, and so I think it's completely fine to revert these percent pen changes. It also just looks nicer for the game to have something be at 10, 20, 40 instead of 8, 16, 32. It looked weird, so I'm completely fine with this. And then we get to the god changes that I've already covered in my previous video, so check that out if you want to learn my thoughts on the god changes and all that stuff. Yeah, pretty huge changes here. There's some that are obviously more impactful than others, and there's some that really just won't impact the game at all, but look how many changes there are here, dude. That's insane. Just ridiculous. The main thing that I'm looking at here are these glyphs up here. Like, the Pridwen Glyphs look absolutely broken. The Runeforged Glyphs look really good, and then the Dagger Glyphs just look like decent. It's just nice to have them, but yeah, gonna be super impactful this patch, I think. Gonna be really huge for tanks, and yeah, let me know your thoughts down below, and I will catch you guys at another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.